to a special Halloween episode of Light O'Clock. This special episode is part of Daylight Awareness Week, which is an initiative organized by the Daylight Academy to remind us of the importance of daylight in our daily life and for our society. And because Daylight Awareness Week this year falls exactly on Halloween's week, we thought we would partner up with the Daylight Academy to produce a special Halloween podcast episode for you. And so tonight, we're diving into the eerie mysteries of sleep and our circadian rhythms. From the strange pull of twilight to the haunting witching hour, tonight's episode blends the science.
It's such an easy subject to present.
The spooky, and even a little bit of supernatural. Joining me on this spooky journey is Anna Wirtz-Justice, the expert of today's episode. She's a pioneer in the field of chronobiology and light therapy, and she's going to help us shed some light on darkness, quite literally, and understand the science behind some of our nighttime experiences. I went to meet her in Basel, Switzerland, some time ago.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are arriving on Basel SBB on platform 12. Please leave the train using the right-hand doors.
She welcomed me in her spacious living room with big windows. Of course, I thought Anna knows a lot about the importance of daylight, and she also applies it to her own living space.
Hello, Carolina.
Hello, hi, thank you. How are you? Nice to meet you.
Fine.
Yes, hi. Very nice place.
Yes.
Yeah, I've never been to Basel before, so it's
Have you done?
It was a fascinating discussion, one that brought science and a few ghostly puns together. Today, we're diving back into that interview, and I'll guide you through what we uncovered. We started talking about the late afternoon, when our bodies are entering a mysterious time of the day. One that some of our listeners may know from a previous episode of Light O'Clock, the Circadian Forbidden Zone. This sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi horror film, but actually it's a real biological phenomenon. So I wanted to ask Anna, what's happening in our bodies at this time of the day?
To understand the forbidden zone, you have to think about the model that sleep researchers have developed in order to understand sleep regulation. And this is called the two-process model of sleep regulation, including a process S, which is sleep pressure building up during wakefulness and declining during sleep. And it's gated by what we call a circadian process, the biological clock in the brain, that tells the body and brain what time of day it is. So process C and process S interact to make us fairly wakeful during the day and sleepy during the early evening to get ready to go to sleep. But our sleep process is rising from the moment we wake up. And towards the early evening, the sleep pressure has built up that actually, if we didn't have a circadian gate, we would be sleepy and want to go to bed about 6 o'clock. What is happening with the circadian gate is that the circadian system, which was low in activity or strength at the beginning of the day, it is growing during the afternoon to be very strong in the early evening. So just as our sleep process of sleepiness is really getting high, our circadian process jumps in and keeps us awake for the whole 16 hours until a normal bedtime at 10 o'clock or so. And it's called the forbidden zone because complicated experiments have shown that trying to fall asleep at this time is very difficult because of the pressure of this circadian process to keep awake.
Right, so it's like a gate. The circadian gate kind of like shuts it down or says, no, not quite yet.
Not yet.
I see.
Not yet.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of a time where one part of your body is saying, we are ready to sleep, and the other part of your body is like, not at all.
Exactly. If one's sleep and wake is fairly well timed, this wake maintenance zone, as it's also called, keeps us awake and keeps us functioning for these 16 hours without too much of a dip, except a little one after lunchtime.
Now, of course, the forbidden zone does not happen at the same time for everyone. It depends on how your clock ticks, as Anna explains.
Everyone has a biological clock that ticks slightly differently. We know about the larks, the early morning people who are up and away and functioning. Their clocks are timed to be active earlier, whereas the rest of us owls need a bit longer to wake up and get moving and are really functioning in the evening. So the gate for an owl and a lark would be earlier or later in order to fit with the daytime activity and sleep of that individual person.
Right.
From the circadian forbidden zone, we dove into the topic of sleep deprivation. We've all had days where we just feel kind of like zombies after a rough night. We don't really function well, we do silly things, we make lots of mistakes. But what's really happening to the brain when we're sleep deprived? Anna explained how prolonged lack of sleep can actually turn us into something close to the walking dead.
Well, being sleep deprived or having days and days and days with reduced sleep means that this process S, this sleep pressure, grows much more than it would in a normal day. And what happens when you're sleep deprived? You get sleepy and you don't function well. Now, sleep deprivation is not healthy because it leads to cognitive dysfunction and making mistakes, not being able to think carefully, just feeling pretty low as well. So if you have sleep problems and are sleep deprived, one should try and find a nice weekend to catch up.
Is that possible, catching up?
A little bit catching up, of course it's possible, but to have a continual routine of sleep deficit, which is a cumulative growing up of the sleep pressure, is not very healthy for good functioning.
So, sleep deprivation, not a good idea, right? And yet, at some point during our conversation, Anna said that in certain circumstances, sleep deprivation can actually be beneficial for some people.
There is another thing about sleep deprivation that many people don't know. In psychiatry, we can ask a seriously depressed person to stay awake all night, and something miraculous happens during the night that we don't understand, that about 4 or 5 in the morning, the witching hour.
Yeah, you heard that right. Witching hour. We'll come back to this concept just a little bit later.
These patients may feel an improvement in mood, and by the middle of the day, in spite of having been awake for 30, 35 hours, they have come out of their serious depression. This is something fascinating for clinicians, of course. Yeah. One problem is that when they sleep again, when they have a recovery sleep, the depression partially comes back. So that's one apparent reason why it's not part of the normal treatment. But in the last 20, 30 years, many clinicians have done research to find out what can we add to one night's sleep deprivation to maintain this unbelievably fast treatment response. And we use light therapy, we use medication, we use a slightly shifted timing of sleep to an hour earlier. That maintains the quality of this clinical response. And sleep deprivation is one of the, is the quickest antidepressant we know.
That is quite fascinating because, I mean, if you think about sleep deprivation, and as we said, right, it's quite a devastating thing for the body. So it's a little counterintuitive to deprive someone of sleep because we know sleep is so important for us and it makes us functioning throughout the day. So do we know anything about why is it so effective?
We don't know very much. We just know that it's effective and that it's effective very quickly. Of course, it's a clue to understand what happens in the brain when a depressive mood switches out into an even a better mood than beforehand. This is a mystery that we still have to find out, and it may give clues to finding other kinds of antidepressant treatments like new drugs.
So basically what Anna is saying is that by understanding how sleep deprivation works and how it has these very fast effects on the mood of these individuals who experience depression, this can actually give us a cue on other ways of treating depression. We then talked about the early evening, a time of the day where shadows start to grow a little longer and daylight slowly fades away. It's a time of the day that feels a little eerie, and it's kind of an in-between limbo between day and night. This is Twilight. And I know what most people are thinking when they're thinking about Twilight. It's probably sunset and then the book with the vampires and Bella. But actually, Twilight is very important for our biological clock.
There are two twilights, one at the beginning of the day, the dawn, and one at the end of the day, the dusk. And the length and shape of dawn and dusk signals change with time of year. Every day of the year is different and also dependent on latitude. The twilights in the far north are very long and mysterious compared with the equatorial twilight, which is like a switch turning off. And actually, in biology, our circadian clock has been designed to respond to the very subtle changes at twilight, whether it be dawn or dusk. And that is the natural signal to which we are pre-programmed, and all other creatures and plants on this earth are pre-programmed to dawn and dusk. We are not programmed for a light switch.
Yeah. So in these two twilights that you said, it's kind of like our circadian system is particularly responsive to this specific light that we receive then?
To the gradual change in light intensity and probably also light spectrum as it changes during the day.
What Anna was saying there resonates with something that we've talked about on the podcast quite a bit, which is that humans actually evolved on a rotating planet that included bright days and dark nights. And so we also developed our circadian rhythms to go with these environmental changes in light and darkness. And so during dusk twilight, this natural light actually sends a message to our body, to our circadian rhythms, to get ready for the night. Except we're not really exposed to natural light anymore.
And in terms of circadian rhythms at this time, what is happening in our bodies? So let's take the dusk twilight. Daylight is fading away and our body is preparing to go to sleep?
In the evening and probably during the dusk, but remember, most of us never see the dusk.
That's true.
We're all indoors. Let us pretend we see the dusk. This would be the signal for the pineal hormone melatonin to start being secreted. And the pineal hormone melatonin gives the body and the brain the signal to get physiologically ready for sleep. Melatonin causes a gradual vasodilation of hands and feet, which means your blood vessels in your hands and feet expand, and that causes warm hands and feet, and everybody knows that you cannot fall asleep with cold hands and feet. So the twilight signal in natural conditions, and this has been studied with students on camping expeditions where they only have the signal of the dawn and dusk, we see that the dusk signal makes them sleepy earlier, and also the dawn signal, which is the important signal for our biological clock. We in the lab and the camping studies have shown that very little light is needed if the shape of the curve of light intensity follows the natural increase from 0 lux to about 100 lux. That is sufficient to shift our biological clock an hour earlier, to synchronize it to the day very precisely. So we don't need very bright light if the signal is shaped like the dawn signal at 47 degrees latitude, for example.
Anna also explained that twilight can be an unsettling experience for some of us. She talked about the phenomenon of sundowning, a condition where people, often those with dementia, experience confusion, anxiety, and restlessness in the late afternoon or evening, just as the sun sets.
This is well known as symptoms of sundowning, whether it really has to do with the sun going down or rather with the circadian system at the beginning of the night, where they become restless and wandering around, and it's not really known what is behind sundowning, but it is a very difficult phenomenon for carers of people with Alzheimer's.
Yeah, of course.
From Twilight, we then venture into total darkness. We talked about why is darkness important, actually. In this podcast, we've often mentioned that we should receive the right light at the right time. But we've not really talked about darkness so much. So I asked Anna, why is darkness important for humans?
Remember, chronobiology is the science of circadian rhythms. It's not only the daytime, it's the entire 24-hour light-dark, day-night cycle. And when we look at the dark phase, which can vary in length depending on latitude and time of year, in day-active species, it's the time for sleep. In night-active species, it's the time for getting something to eat and running around or flying around. The nighttime is crucial depending on the ecological niche of each species. So humans need the darkness for sleep, and bats need the darkness for catching insects.
Another fascinating thing about darkness is that darkness played quite a big role in the first chronobiology studies. And I wanted to speak to Anna specifically about the first cave studies and bunker studies, which were really the first studies proving that humans had an intrinsic or endogenous biological clock.
The first experiments looking at rhythms in humans to see if they really were intrinsic to the human and not just responding to the outside light-dark environment. Michel Siffre went into a cave somewhere near Grenoble, and he had no information about time of day. And when he was taken out of the cave, he said, but it's too early, because his biological clock slowed down to about 24.5 hours. And so when the 20 days were up, he was rather surprised because he thought he had another few days to go.
That's right. In a cave or in a bunker where you're not receiving any light input and the conditions are super constant, days are no longer defined by the 24-hour light and dark cycle, but by the duration of your own circadian period, which is a little shorter or a little longer than 24 hours. And that, as Anna explained to me, depends a little bit on your own biological rhythm.
There's a whole science of the genetics of circadian clocks that we don't go into here, but every person has their individual circadian frequency, as it were, laid down by their genetic program. So an owl would have a slow clock if left in a bunker under conditions without time cues. An owl would tend to get up later and go to bed later and have a periodicity of about 24.5 hours. And a lark, an early person, might have a periodicity of 23.9 hours.
Right.
So the early clocks are faster clocks than the late clocks that are slow clocks.
Right. And so, of course, in a cave, there is no light for your circadian rhythm to synchronize to.
Exactly.
So your clock just runs.
It's called a free run because it goes on its own endogenous frequency.
This kind of self-experimentation by Cifre was just the first of a series of cave or bunker studies. And these studies were actually super important to define what circadian rhythms are, because at the time, there was still a lot of skepticism on whether humans actually would even need an endogenous circadian rhythm on a rotating planet. People did not really believe in this yet.
The more systematic studies of what humans do without time cues was done in the Max Planck Institute for Behavioral Physiology in Andex in Germany. There they built a so-called bunker, which meant it was a Faraday cage with no external influence, no time of day information, a double door to make sure that they were protected from people coming to bring them food, etc. A double door that was open, they could leave at any time, but most of them stayed for a month without any information.
No windows.
No windows. They had a machine to do exercise in. They could have one bottle of Andex beer every day. And Aschoff and Weber characterized much of the formal properties of the human circadian system through these experiments in the bunker. And that was extraordinary because it provided us later with concepts to understand what is happening in certain sleep disorders or in certain psychiatric disorders. And so these so-called bunker studies, which were done at a time where students would do it without being paid very much, except for the bottle of beer. Most of them used it to finish their thesis at last. These bunker experiments were absolutely crucial as a basis for circadian biology and clinical applications.
We then went from bunker studies to talking about how our geographical location can also expose us to total darkness in certain times of the year and certain parts of the world.
So I'm thinking, for example, of people who live, let's say, in north of Europe. They have not a lot of daylight hours in the winter. So they have these long, dark winters. Do we know anything about how that affects their circadian rhythms and their sleep?
A lot of the research on the effects of light in humans were done when one discovered in 1980 or so that bright light can suppress the secretion of pineal melatonin in humans. Up till then, we thought that humans were different from other species, that they chose their light-dark cycles, their rhythms, they were not affected by light. But since then we know, and the diagnosis of seasonal affective disorder has been found in countries that are at moderate latitudes in middle of Europe, but the prevalence increases as you go north.
Right. And seasonal affective disorder, can you just describe that for us?
Seasonal affective disorder is a depression that recurs every winter or nearly every winter as the days get shorter. It's characterized by a spontaneous improvement in spring when the days get longer. As animals that hibernate, humans that have winter depression sleep longer. They eat more, particularly carbohydrates like chocolate and pasta. They gain weight, of course. And they have these unusual symptoms that is not found in classical depression, which is rather characterized by loss of weight, loss of appetite, and less sleep. So winter depressions are found more often in Scandinavia than in Italy.
So you would expect that the further north you go, the more the people living there will be affected by seasonal affective disorder. But actually, Anna explained that that's not really the case.
If you go even far north to the native populations in Scandinavia, such as in Lapland or in
The Samis, yeah.
the Samis in Lapland, or the native peoples in Siberia or in Canada, they don't have winter depression to any great extent, which means that there is some kind of genetic selection. If you don't survive the far north winters, you won't survive and you won't produce children. And so people who don't survive, they either go back south or they die out. So there is this seasonality. There is also seasonal differences in sleep behavior in the far north. And it's not only in winter, and it's also in summer, because the days are so long in summer that you don't have any time to fall asleep. And in the far north, there's not really any darkness. So there's disturbed sleep in summer. And when the days are very short in winter, there's also disturbed sleep because you can't sleep for 18 hours. So the far north has problems with synchronization to very long or very short days. And that's where artificial light treatment or artificial light synchronizing their sleep-wake cycle can help.
We circled back to the concept of light as a therapy during our discussion. But first, I wanted to talk to Anna about this concept of the witching hour, which is an eerie time around 3 a.m. when the world seems quiet, and yet something in our circadian rhythm is happening.
In folklore, you have a lot of stories talking about this window of time between 3 and 4, where supernatural forces of witches or also the devil or ghosts are strongest. It sounds a little spooky and mysterious, but is there any science behind this in terms of what's happening to our body at this time?
To move from superstition and the witching hour straight into chronobiology, it could be very simply explained that our circadian rhythms at 3 to 4 in the morning are at their lowest ebb. This is the minimum of temperature rhythm. This is where we don't function very well. This is the time of day where people are mostly born and people mostly die. The French called it l'heure du loup, the hour of the wolf, which would be the link to this mysterious quality. But I would just say it's the lowest point on the circadian cycle where the body is vulnerable to witches.
Finally, after talking about the dark side of daylight and dark aspects of circadian rhythms and sleep, I wanted to end on a bright note, discussing how therapies like light therapy and dark therapy can help people struggling with their circadian rhythms.
I don't think many listeners know exactly what light therapy is, although it sounds quite intuitive because you have light and you have therapy. So if you put the two words together, it sounds like light can help you. But can you help us unravel how light can help you? Who is this for? And why are we doing this?
It sounds so simple. We are diurnal mammals. We should be outside for so many hours a day. Were we outside, we would synchronize to the dawn signal. We would synchronize to the light in the morning. But we are strange creatures that hide indoors with artificial light. And yet this artificial light is not bright enough to affect our biological clock very much. And this was the discovery in 1980 that we needed brighter light than usual to affect the synthesis of the pineal hormone melatonin. It gave us a tool to manipulate rhythms in humans. And so people with abnormal sleep-wake cycles, one could use bright light to synchronize their sleep to the time of day that is required. And we discovered that light has a mood-elevating effect. Who doesn't feel better when they go outside on a sunny day? And this particular group of winter depressive patients were a sort of gift, a brilliant idea by some researchers in Washington, that they might be particularly vulnerable to the effects of light when the days get shorter in winter, that they become depressed. So maybe we give them a spring day to just pretend it's spring and summer is coming. And the thing is, it worked. And so over the last 30, 40 years, researchers and clinicians in the Northern Hemisphere and in the Southern Hemisphere, northern latitudes and also in equatorial latitudes, they have found that light is an antidepressant not only for winter depression, but also for major depression, which means the depression related to melancholia, or to bipolar depression, which is the manic depressive cycles of some patients who cycle from one state to the other without getting stabilized. And light can really help all kinds of depression. It can help many kinds of sleep disorders.
But not just sleep and circadian disorders, Anna said. In fact, in other illnesses, when patients are recovering in the hospital, receiving enough or the right light is super important for their health.
In many illnesses, not just in sleep medicine, but patients in hospitals or Alzheimer's patients in nursing homes, by having more light in the day room inside. So this is now artificial light, simulating a day outside with a nice broad spectrum similar to daylight. Their cognitive decline can be slowed down by having more light during the day. So what I say is get on your bike and go outside at least half an hour every day.
Is there a better time to do this than another time?
Morning.
So wake up and go outside.
Wake up and go outside. It's the dawn signal that's important for the biological clock.
We talked about light as a therapy. There's also another therapy that is related to light therapy, which involves exactly the opposite, and this is dark therapy. What is this? This sounds, again, a little counterintuitive.
It's so strange, really, when I think back to the beginning of light therapy research, it was not taken seriously. Here we are, biologists really working with clinicians to develop a new treatment, and yet most people think light is something alternative, soft. And I keep saying light is a drug. It affects our brain in so many different ways. So if light is a drug, maybe darkness can be one as well. And bipolar patients, these patients who have manic depressive cycles of regular different lengths, they are most difficult to treat and to maintain an equilibrium. A couple of single case studies showed that if you put a patient who suffers from what is called rapid cycling bipolar disorder, that is to say, they move from depression to mania, back again to depression within days or weeks, they are suffering a great deal because they have no stability of mood. If you put them in a dark room for 16 hours, which is a long winter day, the rapid cycling stopped and their manic episodes also stopped. So this led to the idea that you could treat mania, which is the opposite state to depression, of being absolutely hyper and not really in control of behavior, that a group of psychiatrists took these manic patients and put them in a 16 hours darkness. Of course, you can't sleep. So it was not an easy treatment, but it was a proof of principle to show that darkness is a treatment for this particularly vulnerable group of patients.
Now, I know what you're thinking. Putting someone in a dark room so they can feel better doesn't feel very feasible and feels kind of wrong. When I asked this to Anna, she said nowadays people do it in a different way.
With the discovery of these blue sensitive retinal ganglion cell photoreceptors in the eye that leads specifically to the circadian clock.
By the way, we've talked about these cells quite a lot in the podcast, so if you're feeling a little confused, these are the cells in your retina that are called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cell, which is just a mouthful to say that they respond to light, and they're very important for synchronizing your internal biological rhythm to the external light and dark cycle. You can go back to season 1 to learn more.
The idea came up, well, if we put blue blocking sunglasses on these patients so that the light doesn't hit their circadian clock as it would under normal conditions, maybe that's equivalent to biological darkness.
Yeah.
And that indeed in a careful double-blind clinical study has been shown better than or just as equivalent to treatment with antipsychotic drugs, which is the conventional treatment. So something so simple as wearing blue blocking glasses, which look like orange ski glasses, such a simple treatment may be a new way to control these rapid cyclings and these manic episodes in patients. It's one of the light therapy and dark therapy with glasses are the two main treatments that have entered clinical practice from chronobiology, which is quite something.
That is really quite something. And it is something that Anna has been working hard on, making chronobiology and light therapy enter the clinical practice. In fact, when I asked her what she wishes for in the field and where she sees this field going, she had the answer ready.
I would love the development of application of the various chronobiological principles that we have, manipulating and stabilizing sleep, using light, using darkness, that it really enters everyday clinical practice. And I do wish it would be a bit faster for the patients.
We certainly hope that too. Thank you, listeners, for joining us today on this eerie journey into the depths of sleep. And thanks to Anna for having me at her place and being just such a wonderful guest. I hope we've shed some light on the darker side of sleep, daylight, and circadian rhythms for you. I hope this episode didn't keep you up at night, unless you're listening in the witching hour. In that case, sweet dreams. I usually end up saying, don't forget to lighten up your clock. But this time I'll say, go get your darkness and enjoy it. You've been listening to Light O'Clock. This episode was produced by me, Caro Guidolin. Fact-checking was done by Manuel Spitchen. Music, mix, and sound design were done by Ingo Bednarek, and sound effects are from Pixabay. Show notes and additional resources were created by Maidel Fernandez Alonso. Our social media team includes Hanna-Sophie Heinrichs, Nilo Fartabande, and Zara Alkaf. Lucian Bickerstaff helps with the distribution, and Anna Magdalena Billa is our test listener. Light O'Clock is a podcast produced by the Translational Sensory and Circadian Neuroscience Unit, and we are supported by the Circadian Mental Health Network, the Viscom Prize from the Deutsche Gesellschaft für Psychologie and the Deutsche Gesellschaft für Psychophysiologie und ihre Anwendung, the Max Planck Society and the Max Planck Institute for Biological Cybernetics, and the Technical University of Munich.